The bridge of the horizon was filled with smoke and the sound of alarms. Commander Lisa Morgan stood at her station, her hands moving quickly across the controls. Around her, the ship was falling apart. Sparks flew from damaged panels, and the lights flickered on and off. Through the main window, she could see them coming. The Velcro ships looked like a swarm of insects. Thousands of them, all moving toward her vessel. Lisa pressed the communication button. Her voice was calm, even though her heart was racing. She told her crew to get to the escape pods immediately. Some of them argued. They wanted to stay and fight with her. But she was their commander, and they had to follow orders. One by one, she watched the escape pods launch from the horizon. Small lights in the darkness of space, carrying her crew to safety. The Velcros were getting closer now. Their ships surrounded the horizon from all sides. Lisa could see their weapons charging, ready to destroy what was left of her vessel. For 300 years, these creatures had been unstoppable. They destroyed planets and civilizations. They consumed everything in their path. No one in the galaxy had ever beaten them in a real fight. A message came through on her screen. It was from the Velcros Queen herself. The creature appeared on the display, tall and terrible, with sharp mandibles and cold, dark eyes. The translation system turned her clicking sounds into words that Lisa could understand. The Queen was mocking her. She said that humans were weak, just like all the other species the Velcros had destroyed. She said Lisa would die alone, and her death would teach humanity to know their place in the galaxy. Lisa listened to all of it. She did not show fear. When the Queen finished talking, Lisa reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal. It was old, passed down through her family for many generations. Her grandmother had given it to her years ago, along with a story that seemed impossible to believe. But Lisa had always kept it close, just in case. The crystal was smooth and warm in her hand. It glowed with a faint blue light. Lisa placed it into a special slot on her control panel. The slot had been custom built, hidden from official inspections. She had prepared for this moment, even though she hoped it would never come. Her fingers moved across the controls, entering a sequence that she had memorized long ago. A signal began to transmit from the horizon. It was not a normal distress call. This signal traveled on frequencies that should not exist. It went to places that were not on any star map, across the galaxy, in the council chambers where representatives from hundreds of species watched the battle. Some of the oldest beings felt a sudden chill. They recognized something in that signal, something from ancient legends that most species had forgotten. The Velcros Queen saw what Lisa was doing. Her mandibles clicked faster, showing anger and confusion. She ordered her ships to destroy the horizon immediately. But Lisa was already entering the final command. She looked at the camera that was broadcasting her final moments across the galaxy. She wanted her crew to see that she was not afraid. She wanted humanity to see that she died, protecting them. Lisa thought about her family as her finger moved toward the final button. She thought about her grandmother, who had told her the story of the crystal when she was just a child. The story of an ancestor named Margaret Morgan, who had traveled into deep space long ago. Margaret had found something out there in the darkness. Something that most people did not believe was real. She had saved it, even though it meant sacrificing her own ship and nearly dying in the cold of space. In return, that creature had given Margaret a gift, a promise, a bond that could be called upon once, when humanity needed it most. The crystal was the key to that bond. For 7 generations, the Morgan family had kept it safe, waiting for the right moment. Lisa knew that this was that moment. If she did nothing, the Velcros would destroy her crew's escape pods before they reached the jump point. If she died without trying, humanity would face the swarm alone. She pressed the button. The Horizon's core went into overload. Lisa had 30 seconds before the explosion. She used that time to watch her crew's escape pods disappear into hyperspace. They were safe. That was all that mattered. The Velcros ships tried to pull back, but they were too close. The explosion caught dozens of them, turning them into fragments of metal and chitin. The blast was visible from 3 star systems away. It lit up the darkness like a new sun, being born and dying in the same moment. The council representatives watched in silence. Another brave soul lost to the Velcros. Another species learning the hard way that courage alone was not enough to stop the swarm. They began to prepare statements of sympathy to send to Earth. But in the places between places, in the dark spaces where normal M3 days passed since Commander Lisa Morgan died, the galaxy mourned her sacrifice. But life continued. Wars did not stop for one death, no matter how brave. The Velcros swarm moved forward with their plans. Their next target was a human colony called New Portland. It was a peaceful place, home to 12,000 people who had left Earth to build a new life among the stars. The colony had minimal defenses, a few orbital platforms with outdated weapons, a small garrison of security personnel, who were trained more for keeping peace than fighting wars. When the scanners detected the Velcros fleet approaching, everyone knew what it meant. There would be no escape. The colony was too far from any jump point. Evacuation ships would be destroyed before they could leave the system. Captain Jake Morrison was in charge of the colony's defense. He was a good man, calm under pressure. But he was not a miracle worker. He looked at the tactical display and saw 300 Velcros ships entering the system. His platforms could maybe take down 5 or 6 before being overwhelmed. He activated the colony-wide communication system and told people the truth. They had hours, maybe less. He suggested that people spend that time with their families. The colonists did not panic. They had known the risks when they chose to live on the frontier. Parents held their children. Husbands and wives sat together, watching the sky. Some people recorded final messages to send to loved ones on other worlds. Others prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Jake himself sat in the command center with his small team, determined to fight until the end, even if it was hopeless. The Velcros swarm descended from the sky like a dark cloud. Their ships blotted out the sun, casting shadows across New Portland's main settlement. The sound of their engines was like thunder that would not stop. Jake gave the order to fire. The orbital platforms opened up with everything they had. A few Velcros ships exploded, but it was like throwing stones at an ocean. The swarm kept coming. Then the sky tore open. Not with explosions or weapons that Jake recognized. The very fabric of space seemed to rip apart, creating wounds in reality itself. Through these rifts came something that Jake had never seen before. Creatures. Massive creatures that looked like they had been born from nightmares and darkness. Each one was the size of a small warship, covered in scales that were blacker than the void of space. Their eyes glowed with a light that reminded Jake of dying stars. The colonists who were watching the sky stood frozen in fear and wonder. These creatures moved through space as if it was water. They had no ships, no visible means of propulsion. They simply moved, fast and graceful despite their enormous size. And they were heading straight for the Velcros swarm. What happened next would be talked about for generations. The creatures, which Jake would later learn were called the Krell, attacked the Velcros with a savagery that shocked everyone watching. It was not a battle. It was a hunt. The Krell moved like sharks through a school of fish. Their claws, each one longer than a person was tall, tore through Velcros ships as if the metal was paper. Their teeth, glowing with some kind of energy, bit through hull plating and engines. The Velcros tried to fight back. They fired their weapons at the Krell, hitting them with enough firepower to destroy buildings. But the creatures barely seemed to notice. The few wounds that the weapons did make healed almost immediately. The Krell were not just strong, they were nearly invincible. Jake watched his tactical display as Velcros ship after Velcros ship disappeared from the screen. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable was being destroyed in minutes. The Velcros Queen, watching from her command ship at the edge of the system, made a decision that her species had never made before. She ordered a retreat, The remaining Velcro ships turned and fled into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of nearly 200 vessels. The Krell did not chase them. They had come to protect New Portland, not to hunt the swarm across the galaxy. When the last Velcro ship was gone, the Krell gathered in the sky above the colony. There were 7 of them, each slightly different in size and markings. The largest one, a massive creature with scars across its scales, descended lower. It hovered maybe 100 meters above the main settlement. Jake could feel the power radiating from it. This was a predator, an apex hunter that sat at the top of the food chain. Humanity, by all logic, should be prey to something like this, but the creature made no hostile move. It simply waited, its burning eyes looking down at the colony. Jake did not know what to do. First contact protocols did not cover situations like this. He decided to do the only thing that made sense. He walked outside the command center, out into the open where the creature could see him clearly. He looked up at those terrible, beautiful eyes and waited. The creature tilted its head, studying him. Then something incredible happened. Jake felt a presence in his mind. Not words exactly, but images and feelings. The creature was communicating directly with his thoughts. And what it showed him made his breath catch in his throat. He saw Lisa Morgan. He saw her standing on the bridge of the horizon. He saw her holding a crystal that glowed with blue light. He saw her final moments, her sacrifice, and her hope that the signal would reach someone who would help. The Galactic Council met an emergency session within 6 hours of the New Portland incident. Representatives from 400 different species appeared through holographic projection, filling the massive chamber with light and noise. Everyone was talking at once, demanding answers, making accusations, and expressing fear. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Claire Dixon, representing humanity. Claire was the experienced diplomat who had negotiated trade deals and peace treaties for 20 years. But nothing in her career had prepared her for this moment. She stood on the platform while hundreds of alien species all focused their attention on her. Some looked angry, some looked scared, a few looked calculating, already trying to figure out how to use this situation to their advantage. The council leader, a tall being from a species called the Zenthari, called for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, he spoke directly to Claire. His questions were direct and sharp. How long had humanity known about the Krell? Why had they hidden this alliance from the Council? What other secrets was Earth keeping? Were the Krell planning to attack other species? Claire took a deep breath and told them the truth. Humanity had not been hiding anything. Until 3 days ago, most humans thought the Krell were just stories. Ancient legends passed down from the early days of space exploration. Even the government officials on Earth were scrambling to understand what had happened. She had been given permission to share everything that Earth knew about the situation. She activated her own holographic display and showed them files that were over 100 years old, records from the year 2187, when humanity had first pushed beyond their own solar system. A ship called the Pioneer had been on a deep space mission, mapping new systems and looking for resources. The captain of that ship was a woman named Margaret Morgan. According to the records, Margaret had detected a strange energy signature in an unexplored region of space. When she investigated, she found something trapped in a spatial anomaly. The records were damaged and hard to read in places, but the essential facts were clear. Margaret had found a young Krell, barely more than a hatchling, caught in a tear in space that was slowly crushing it. Margaret had made a choice. She used her ship's power to stabilize the anomaly and free the creature. It had cost her everything. The Pioneer's faster-than-light drive was destroyed in the process. The ship was left drifting in deep space, far from any trade routes or colonies. Margaret and her crew had to survive on emergency rations for 3 months before a rescue ship finally found them. 2 crew members died during that time. Margaret herself nearly died from starvation and exposure. But before the young Krell left, its parent had appeared. A massive creature that made the ones protecting New Portland looked small by comparison. Instead of attacking the humans who had saved its child, it had given Margaret a gift, the crystal that Lisa Morgan would use 100 years later. The parent Krell had somehow communicated with Margaret, making her understand that the crystal was a bond marker, a promise that could be called upon once, when humanity faced its darkest hour. Margaret had brought the crystal back to Earth. She told her story, but most people did not believe her. Space was big and strange, they said. She had probably found some unusual mineral or encountered a species they did not know yet. The idea of dimension-traveling apex predators was too fantastic to accept. Over time, the story became family legend. The crystal was passed down through the Morgan line, from parent to child, along with the story of what it represented. Lisa Morgan had been the 7th generation to carry the crystal. She had believed the story when others did not. When she saw the Velcro swarm coming, when she knew that her crew and her species were facing extinction, she had activated the bond. She had gambled everything on a story that most people thought was just a fairy tale. Claire finished her presentation and looked out at the council. She could see that some of them believed her. Others were still skeptical. A representative from a species called the Draxin stood and asked the obvious question. If the bond was real, did that mean the Krell would attack anyone who threatened humanity? Were they now a weapon that humans could point at their enemies? Before Claire could answer, the chamber's sensors detected something. A spatial rift was opening right in the middle of the council chamber. Security forces raised their weapons, but it was too late to stop what was coming through. Razor, the largest of the Krell from New Portland, emerged from the rift. His massive form filled half the chamber, forcing representatives to back away in fear. The council leader demanded to know what the creature wanted. Razor did not speak in any language they could hear. Instead, he interfaced directly with the council's communication systems. His thoughts were translated into words that everyone could understand. The translation was rough, mechanical, but the meaning was clear. The bond was with humanity alone. The Krell owed a debt to the Morgan line, and by extension, to all humans. Lisa Morgan's sacrifice had honored that debt in full. Now the Krell would honor her memory by protecting her species. They would hunt those who threatened humans. They would defend human space from invasion. This was not negotiable. This was simply how things would be. A brave or foolish representative asked what would happen if the council refused to accept this arrangement. Razor's eyes flared brighter. He showed them all a vision, the same way he had shown the colonists on New Portland. But this vision was different. It showed the Krell at full strength, thousands of them, moving through space, hunting and killing. It showed planets torn apart and fleets reduced to dust. It was not a threat exactly. It was a demonstration of capability, a reminder that the Krell were apex predators who had existed long before any current galactic civilization. The message was clear. The Council could accept the bond between humanity and the Krell, or the Council could learn what it meant to be prey. The choice was theirs, but they should choose wisely. Razor disappeared back through the rift as suddenly as he had arrived. The chamber erupted into noise again, but the tone was different now. Fear had become. The Velcro swarm had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. They had never retreated from a fight. They had never known defeat. But after New Portland, everything changed. The Queen pulled her forces back from human space, consolidating her fleet around her core hive worlds. She needed time to understand this new threat and plan a response. It was not enough time. The Krell did not wait for the Velcros to be ready. They hunted. Commander Ryan Porter stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Defiant, watching his tactical display with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had been a military officer for 15 years, fought in border skirmishes and pirate raids. He thought he understood combat. But what the Krell were teaching him made everything he knew seem primitive by comparison. 3 Krell moved alongside his fleet. They had appeared without warning 2 days ago, emerging from spatial rifts near the Defiant's position. At first, Ryan had been concerned. Having apex predators following his ship seemed dangerous. But the Krell had made their intentions clear through the same mental communication they had used at New Portland. They were here to coordinate, to hunt together. Ryan's fleet was heading toward a Velcross supply depot in a contested system. Intelligence suggested the depot was lightly defended, a good target for a raid. But the Krell had shown him something his sensors could not detect. There were Velcro ships hiding in the asteroid field near the depot. It was a trap. If Ryan had gone in without the warning, he would have lost half his fleet. Instead, the Krell taught him a different approach. They showed him how to read the flow of space itself, how to sense the disturbances that ships made even when cloaked or hiding. It was not technology, exactly. It was more like instinct, a way of feeling the universe that humans had never developed. Ryan could not do it himself, but he could learn to trust the Krell when they warned him of danger. The attack on the depot was a massacre, but not in the way the Velcros had planned. The Krell struck first, appearing inside the asteroid field through their spatial rifts. They tore into the hidden Velcros ambush ships with savage efficiency. By the time Ryan's fleet arrived, the trap had been turned against its makers. The depot fell in under an hour. Lieutenant Amy Chen was the communications officer aboard the Defiant. She was brilliant with languages and codes, always looking for patterns in data. The Krell fascinated her. During the quiet periods between battles, she studied their communication methods. She recorded the energy patterns they emitted and analyzed how they coordinated their attacks. What she discovered changed everything. The Krell were not just talking to each other. They were sharing experiences. When one Krell learned something, they all learned it through some kind of instantaneous connection. Distance did not matter. A Krell hunting near Earth could share knowledge with another Krell halfway across the galaxy in the same moment. More than that, they were sharing memories of Lisa Morgan. Amy found the pattern repeated across every Krell communication she analyzed. Lisa's final moments, her sacrifice, her determination to save her crew. It was like a sacred text that they constantly referenced and shared. Lisa had become something like a saint to them, a perfect example of the values they now protected. Amy brought her findings to Ryan. He sat in his ready room, reading her report with growing understanding. The Krell were not just allies by contract or convenience. They were believers. They had adopted Lisa's cause as their own. Protecting humanity was not just about honoring a debt. It was about protecting the species that had shown them something they had never encountered before. Selfless sacrifice for others. Ryan realized that Lisa had not just called the Krell to save humanity. She had given them purpose beyond hunting. For creatures that existed only to chase and kill, that purpose was revolutionary. They had found meaning in protection instead of predation. This understanding changed how Ryan worked with the Krell. He stopped thinking of them as weapons and started treating them as partners. He shared human tactical doctrine with them. They learned about flanking maneuvers, supply line disruption, and strategic planning. In return, they taught humans how to hunt, how to be patient, how to strike when the enemy was most vulnerable. The results were devastating for the Velcros. Hive ships that had been thought invincible were found drifting in space, their crews simply gone, consumed by creatures that could fold space and appear anywhere. Velcros supply convoys vanished without a trace. Forward bases woke up to find Krell waiting for them, having somehow passed through all their defenses during the night. The Velcros Queen watched her empire being dismantled piece by piece. She had conquered hundreds of worlds. She had destroyed civilizations that were millions of years old. But she had never faced an enemy like this. The Krell did not fight like other species. They did not care about territory or resources. They only cared about the hunt. And humanity had pointed them at the swarm. In her throne room on the Hive world, the Queen made a decision. If she could not defeat the Krell in battle, she would force humanity to betray them. She would make the humans choose between their alliance with the predators and the lives of their civilians. She began planning an operation that would span every human colony at once. Ryan Porter received intelligence about increased Velcros activity near human space. Multiple swarm fleets were moving into position around different systems. It looked like the Queen was planning something big. He reported it to Fleet Command and increased patrols around vulnerable colonies. But even with the Krell helping, humanity could not defend everything at once. There were too many colonies, too many civilian stations, spread across too much space. Ryan looked at the tactical projections and felt cold fear. If the Velcros attacked everywhere simultaneously, even the Krell would have to choose which places to defend. Millions could die, while the predators were busy elsewhere. He shared his concerns with the Krell who traveled with his fleet. They understood the problem. Through their mental link, they showed him that more of their kind were coming. The original 7 who had appeared at New Portland were calling others. The hunt was expanding. But even with more Krell, the numbers were not in humanity's favor. Amy Chen worked around the clock, trying to the broadcasts went out across every communication channel in the galaxy. Every frequency, every network, every system capable of receiving signals suddenly carried the same message. The Velcros Queen appeared on screens from the core worlds to the frontier. Her image impossible to block or filter out. She had used resources from across her empire to ensure that everyone would hear what she had to say. Her message was simple and terrible. She spoke directly to humanity, her translated words cold and calculated. The swarm was offering peace, but that peace came with a price. Humanity would surrender the original Bond crystal, the artifact that Margaret Morgan had been given over 100 years ago. The crystal currently rested in a museum on Earth, displayed as a treasured piece of human history. If humans gave up the crystal, the Velcros would withdraw from all human space forever. The war would end. But if humanity refused, the Queen promised something else. Every human colony, every station, every outpost would be attacked simultaneously within 72 hours. Military targets and civilian populations alike. The Krell were powerful, but they could not be everywhere at once. They would have to choose which human lives to save and which to let die. The Queen would force them to make that choice again and again until the bond broke or humanity was destroyed. Ambassador Claire Dixon sat in the Emergency Council meeting on Earth. Around the table were military leaders, government officials, and scientific advisors. Everyone was talking at once, arguing about what to do. Some said they should surrender the crystal immediately. It was just an object. After all, the lives of billions were more important than a museum piece. Others argued that giving in to the Queen's demands would only delay the inevitable. The Velcros would attack again eventually, and humanity would have lost their connection to the Krell. The crystal was a symbol of the bond, and surrendering it would be seen as weakness by every species in the galaxy. Claire listened to both sides, her mind working through the problem. She had been in difficult negotiations before, but nothing compared to this. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on her. Whatever decision they made would define humanity's future. Choose wrong, and the species might not survive the consequences. Then a message came through from the Krell. Razor himself was requesting to appear before the council. Claire authorized it, and the massive predator materialized in the center of the room through a spatial rift. His presence made the chamber feel small and cramped. Some of the officials backed away instinctively, their primitive hindbrain recognizing a predator that could kill them without effort. Razor communicated through the mental link that all Krell seemed to share. His thoughts were translated into words that everyone could hear and understand. He told them that the bond was not the crystal. The crystal was merely a tool, a way to activate a promise that had already been made. The true bond was the action that Margaret Morgan had taken. She had risked everything to save a Krell hatchling. Lisa Morgan had honored that legacy by sacrificing herself for her crew. These actions proved that humans understood something important. That life had value beyond personal survival. That protecting others was worth any cost. This was what the Krell respected. This was what they chose to defend. If humanity decided to surrender the crystal to save billions of lives, the Krell would understand. They would judge humanity not by their possession of artifacts, but by their willingness to protect their own people. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Velcros Queen had miscalculated. She thought the bond was a contract that could be broken by taking away a physical object. She did not understand that Lisa Morgan had forged something deeper. A relationship based on shared values and mutual respect. Claire felt something click into place in her mind. She understood what needed to happen. She stood and addressed the council with new confidence. Humanity would not surrender the crystal, but neither would they hide behind the Krell. Every human ship, every defense platform, every colony militia would prepare to fight. They would stand alongside their allies, not behind them. The decision was made within the hour. Claire broadcast humanity's response on the same channels the Queen had used. She spoke clearly and without fear. Humanity rejected the ultimatum. The crystal would remain where it was. But more than that, humans would prove that they deserved the bond with the Krell. They would fight for their survival. With everything they had. The Velcros Queen received the message in her throne room. She had expected the humans to either surrender or panic. Instead, they had chosen defiance. It did not matter. She had planned for this outcome. Her fleets were already moving into position. In 72 hours, humanity would learn what it meant to face the full might of the swarm. But the Queen had made a mistake. She had given humanity time to prepare, and humans, when given time and motivation, could be remarkably creative. Ryan Porter's fleet raced toward the colony world of Harrison's Landing. Intelligence suggested it would be one of the primary targets. The Defiant and 12 other ships took up defensive positions around the planet. 3 Krell moved with them, including one of the original 7 from New Portland. But Ryan was not just waiting for the attack. He had been studying how the Krell fought and adapted their tactics for human use. He had his ships spread out in a pattern that looked random but was actually designed to cover more space. Each ship had specific sectors to monitor, creating an overlapping network of sensors and weapons. On the ground, Captain Jake Morrison was organizing the civilian population of New Portland. Every person capable of holding a weapon was being trained. Shelters were reinforced. Emergency supplies were distributed. Jake had seen what the Krell could do, but he refused to be helpless. If the Velcros came to his colony again, they would find humans ready to fight back. Amy Chen worked with scientists across human space, trying to find any advantage they could use. She had been analyzing Velcros communication patterns for weeks and had discovered something interesting. The swarm coordinated through a hierarchical system. Destroy the command ship in a fleet, and the rest would lose cohesion for several minutes. It was not much of a weakness, but it was something. She sent her findings to every human commander, along with tactical suggestions for exploiting it. Target the largest ships first. Disrupt their command structure. Make the swarm fight as individuals instead of a coordinated whole. Combined with Krell hunting tactics, it might be enough to turn the tide. The 72 hours passed slowly. Humanity prepared as best they could. The Krell gathered in larger numbers than anyone had seen before. Apparently, Razor had called for reinforcements, and the battle for Earth began with fire raining from the sky. Nearly 1,000 Velcros ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their weapons already charging. They moved in perfect formation, a swarm that had crushed civilizations for 300 years. Their target was clear. The third planet from the sun, the human homeworld, where the crystal they wanted was kept in a museum. Admiral Helen Carter commanded Earth's defense fleet from the battleship Liberty. She had 42 ships under her command, facing odds of more than 20 to 1. In any normal battle, this would be a massacre. Earth would fall, and the Velcros would claim their prize. But this was not a normal battle. Helen had allies that the swarm had not fully accounted for. Razor appeared on the Liberty's bridge through a spatial rift, his massive form somehow fitting into the command center without destroying anything. He communicated directly with Helen through the mental link. 17 Krell were converging on Earth. More were protecting other human colonies, but the home world would get the largest concentration of predators. The hunt was about to begin. Helen gave the order to engage. Her ships moved forward in the pattern that Amy Chen had designed, spreading out to maximize sensor coverage and create overlapping fields of fire. The Velcros responded by accelerating their approach, confident in their numerical superiority. They had done this 1,000 times before, against 100 different species. The first Velcros ships to die never saw what killed them. Krell appeared inside their formations through spatial rifts, materializing within meters of their hulls. Claws tore through armor plating. Energy weapons that could destroy cities were ripped apart like toys. The swarm's perfect formation collapsed into chaos as captains tried to understand where the attacks were coming from. Helen's fleet took advantage of the confusion. They focused fire on the largest Velcros ships, the command vessels that coordinated swarm tactics. Amy's research proved accurate. When a command ship exploded, the vessels around it lost cohesion for precious seconds. Human ships poured fire into those gaps, destroying Velcros craft before they could reorganize. But the swarm was vast, and numbers still mattered. For every Velcros ship destroyed, 2 more pressed forward. Helen watched her tactical display as 3 of her ships took critical damage. The Defiant, Ryan Porter's ship, had joined the defense of Earth and was now fighting off a dozen Velcros attackers. One of her frigates exploded in a ball of flame, taking 80 crew members with it. Then the Krell showed humanity what true apex predators could do when they stopped holding back. Razor led a charge directly into the thickest part of the Velcros formation. 16 other Krell followed him, moving in a coordinated pattern that seemed almost choreographed. They did not just attack, they devastated. Dozens of Velcros ships were torn apart in seconds. The swarm tried to concentrate fire on the predators, but their weapons barely scratched the Krell's scales. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships fought with a desperation born of protecting their home. The Krell hunted with a precision that came from millions of years of evolution. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Ships started to retreat individually rather than as a coordinated swarm. Helen could see the panic spreading through their ranks. At New Portland, Captain Jake Morrison was fighting a very different battle. The Velcros had sent 200 ships to destroy the colony, revenge for their earlier defeat. But Jake had learned from his first encounter with the swarm. The civilian population was sheltered in reinforced bunkers. His security forces were using guerrilla tactics, hitting and running rather than standing in open battle. And the Krell, who had originally saved New Portland, had returned. They fought alongside humans this time, coordinating their attacks through the mental link. Jake found himself able to sense where the Krell were planning to strike, allowing him to position his forces to support them. It was like being part of a pack, hunting together toward a common goal. A Velcros landing craft managed to make it through the defenses. Insectoid warriors poured out, heading toward the main shelter, where civilians were hiding. Jake and his team intercepted them in the streets of the colony. The fighting was brutal and close. Jake lost people, friends he had known for years, but the civilians stayed safe behind reinforced doors, and the Velcros advance was stopped. When the Krell arrived to support them, the tide of battle shifted completely. The insectoids that had seemed unstoppable were suddenly prey. They tried to retreat to their landing craft, but it was too late. The Krell did not leave survivors when they hunted. Across human space, similar battles played out on dozens of worlds. The Velcros had planned to overwhelm humanity with simultaneous attacks. They had calculated that even with Krell support, humans would have to sacrifice some colonies to save others. But the Queen had underestimated 2 things. First, how fiercely humans would fight for their homes. Second, how effectively the Krell could coordinate across vast distances. Every Krell in the galaxy was connected through their mental link. They shared tactical information instantaneously. When one Krell discovered a weakness in Velcro's ships, they all knew it immediately. When a human commander developed a successful tactic, the Krell could spread that knowledge to other human forces within seconds. The swarm was fighting not just against humanity and the Krell separately, but against a combined force that learned and adapted faster than they could respond. The Velcro's queen watched her carefully planned offensive collapse from her throne room. She had committed nearly half her total forces to this attack. They were being destroyed faster than she could pull them back. For the first time in her long life, she felt something that no Velcros should feel. Doubt. She opened a communication channel to all human command frequencies. Her image appeared on screens across human space. She was offering a ceasefire. The swarm would withdraw immediately. In exchange, humanity would agree to non-aggression pacts and recognized borders. It was not the surrender she had planned to force from them, but it was better than watching her empire being dismantled. Admiral Helen Carter received the transmission on the Liberty. She looked at the tactical display, seeing Velcro's ships already starting to pull back from Earth. She could accept the ceasefire and claim a defensive victory, or she could press the advantage while the swarm was broken and bleeding. It was not really her decision to make alone, but there was no time to consult with higher authorities. She thought about Lisa Morgan, the commander who had started all of this with one desperate act. Lisa had not been thinking about military victories or political advantage. She had been thinking about protecting her crew. Helen made her decision based on that example. She accepted the ceasefire. The Velcros would be allowed to retreat, but the terms were not negotiable. The swarm would withdraw from all human territory and establish a buffer zone 3 systems deep. They would pay reparations for the colonies they had attacked, and they would surrender detailed maps of their territory to the Galactic Council, ending the mystery of where their core worlds were located. The Queen had no choice but to accept. Her alternative was to watch the Krell hunt her forces to extinction. She agreed to all terms and ordered a full withdrawal. Within hours, Velcro ships were fleeing human space, leaving behind wreckage and defeat. The war was over. Humanity had won not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through the bond between a species that valued sacrifice and predators that valued that quality above all else. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. On Earth, in the museum where the crystal was kept, they erected a new memorial next to the artifact. A holographic statue of Commander Lisa Morgan, standing on the bridge of the horizon, her hand raised in final salute. Around the memorial, careful observers could see marks in the floor, claw marks, deep gouges in the reinforced metal. The Krell came to pay their respects, leaving their mark as a sign of honor. Ryan Porter visited the memorial when he returned to Earth after the battle. He stood there for a long time, looking at the image of the commander he had never met, but whose legacy had saved his life and the lives of billions. Other visitors came and went, but Ryan stayed. He wanted to remember this moment, this feeling of gratitude and wonder. Jake Morrison brought the survivors from New Portland to see the memorial when the colony was being rebuilt. They wanted their children to understand what Lisa Morgan had done, how one person's sacrifice had changed the fate of their entire species. The Krell who had saved New Portland came too, appearing through a spatial rift to stand vigil alongside the humans. Amy Chen continued her research into Krell communication, now with their full cooperation. She was learning their language, their culture, their way of seeing the universe. They were teaching her things that no human had ever known. In return, she was helping them understand humanity better, translating the nuances of human emotion and motivation that even the mental link could not fully convey. Ambassador Claire Dixon stood before the Galactic Council one more time. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Council, with all rights and protections. No species objected, some because they respected what humanity had accomplished, others because they feared the Krell who had bonded with them. Either way, humanity's place in the galaxy was secured. The Velcro's queen returned to her hive world, diminished, but not destroyed. She would rebuild slowly, carefully, never again challenging humanity directly. She had learned the lesson that so many other conquerors had learned before her. The most dangerous opponent is not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. In the years that followed, the story of Lisa Morgan would be told across the galaxy, not just by humans, but by other species as well. She became a symbol of the best that intelligent life could aspire to: courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to risk everything for others. The Krell made sure her story was never forgotten, sharing her memory across their kind like a sacred text. And sometimes, when human ships traveled through deep space, they would encounter Krell hunting in the darkness. The predators would acknowledge them with a dip of their massive heads, a gesture of respect between allies. The galaxy had watched Commander Lisa Morgan die, but her legacy lived on in every Krell that answered humanity's call, in every human who fought with honor and courage, and in the bond between two species that proved even the fiercest predators could choose to protect rather than destroy. Her name was Lisa Morgan, and she had commanded an empire of apex predators, not through force or fear, but through the simple power of her final, selfless act. His kind had answered. By the time the deadline approached, there were over 50 Krell distributed across human space. It was still not enough to defend everywhere, but it was better than the original 7. When the Velcros finally attacked, they came in massive waves, just as the Queen had promised. Every human colony, every station, every outpost, found themselves facing swarm ships. The largest attack came at Earth itself, where the Queen had sent nearly 1,000 vessels. She wanted the crystal, and she was willing to burn humanity's home world to get it, but she found something she had not expected. Humans who fought like cornered animals, desperate and fierce. Ships that used tactics they had learned from apex predators, and the Krell themselves, appearing through spatial rifts at the exact moments they were needed most, striking with precision that turned battles into hunts. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and the galaxy watched to see if one commander's sacrifice would be enough to save her entire species. Dicked where the Velcros would strike. She analyzed their movement patterns, their supply chains, their communication traffic. She was looking for any clue that would tell her where the main attack would come. But the Velcros had learned to hide their intentions better. They knew humans were working with the Krell now, and had adapted. Ryan sat in his command chair, watching the stars through the main viewport. Somewhere out there, the Velcros Queen was preparing to make her move, and humanity, despite having the most powerful predators in the galaxy on their side, was still vulnerable. The swarm had one last card to play, and Ryan suspected it would cost lives, no matter how well they prepared. He thought about Lisa Morgan, the commander he had never met but whose actions had changed everything. She had sacrificed herself to save her crew. Now Ryan and thousands of others like him were trying to honor that sacrifice by protecting humanity from the consequences of her desperate gamble. He just hoped they would be ready when the Queen finally showed her hand. Dominant emotion. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years suddenly felt very small and vulnerable. Claire stood quietly, her mind racing. She had not asked for this. Humanity had not asked for this. Lisa Morgan had just been trying to save her crew, but the consequences of her action were reshaping the entire political structure of the galaxy. Some species would resent humanity for this new power. Others would try to become allies to gain protection. Some might even try to break the bond, though Claire could not imagine how. The Zenthari Council leader called for a vote. Should the Council officially recognize the bond between humanity and the Krell? The votes came in quickly. 378 in favor, 22 against. The Council had made its choice. Humanity now stood under the protection of the galaxy's most feared predators. Claire sent a message back to Earth, reporting what had happened. Then she sat down and allowed herself a moment of weakness. She thought about Lisa Morgan, a commander she had never met, who had changed everything with one desperate act. The galaxy had watched her die, but her death had given humanity something no other species possessed: the loyalty of creatures that even legends feared. The vision was shared with everyone in the colony at the same time. 12,000 people all saw the same thing. They understood in that moment that these creatures, these Krell, had come because Lisa had called them. An old debt was being paid. A promise made generations ago was being kept. The Krell had come to protect humanity because a human had once protected one of them. Jake felt tears on his face. He was not ashamed of them. He raised his hand in a salute, a gesture of respect and thanks. The large Krell, the one that Jake would start calling Razor because of the scar across its face, responded. It dipped its massive head, acknowledging the gesture. Then it turned and looked toward the stars where the Velcros had fled. The meaning was clear. The Krell would stay. They would protect human space, and they would hunt those who threatened their bonded species. The age of humanity standing alone against the darkness was over. They had allies now. Allies that the galaxy had thought were just myths and legends. Allies that were the most dangerous predators in known space. News of what happened at New Portland spread across the galaxy within hours. The council chambers erupted into chaos. Species that had never shown fear before were now terrified. The Krell were real, and they were allied with humanity. Everything had changed. Adder feared to go. Something else was happening. The signal that Lisa had sent was being received. Creatures that had been sleeping for a very long time began to wake up. They remembered the debt. They remembered the kindness shown to one of their own. So many years ago, they remembered the name Morgan. The Velcros queen returned to her hive ship, satisfied that the human threat had been dealt with. She began to plan her next attack on human colonies. The species would be easy to break now that they had seen their brave commander die. Fear would spread among them. They would surrender or be consumed. It was the way of the galaxy. The strong survived, and the weak became food. She did not know that she had just made the biggest mistake in Velcros history. She did not know that Lisa Morgan's final act had awakened something that even the swarm should fear. The galaxy had watched Lisa die. But death was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of something that would change the balance of power forever. In the cold vacuum of space, in the darkness between stars, eyes that burned like dying suns opened for the first time in centuries. The hunt was about to begin.